Hi, Lilia. This is Linda. Thank you so much for your patience as I try to get through all these feedbacks. I want to talk to you about your essay. I've made some marks on here that I hope will help you navigate through, but I also want to talk to you a little bit about what you're doing. So first of all, let me tell you how I do this. I've got a few different colors I use. If you see anything highlighted in green, I think that that is a significant idea in the paragraph or significant to the whole essay. And so everything that's been highlighted in green, I think, is an important idea and goes to your overall thesis or theme or message. Things that are highlighted in red are either grammatically incorrect or they have some coherence or clarity problems, or maybe just I want you to take a second look at them. Things that are underlined, it's not that they're wrong, but I wonder about the order of the sentence, or I just put some personal notes on the side. I'll talk to you about this right here when I get into the paper. And then the final one is things that are highlighted in pink are things that I love. There was another one in your paper, I thought. To work. You definitely understand the organization. You've chosen to do kind of a flashback chronological organizational strategy, which works really well. You have a heading. I do want you to add in your final draft, I want you to add a title. The title should be something that represents the message of your overall paper, but without giving it all away. So let's talk about the overall ideas. First of all, your storytelling strategy is wonderful because you really have captured my attention with all of the wonderful images and details. You have a knack for describing things and for helping me, the reader, or any reader, I think, to really have a sense of what your experience was like in Miss Leverton's classroom. And when you start off by saying that you felt so insecure and stupid in third grade in your reading skills, and then you also say that you could hardly understand and that you're staring at the cover of the book, and now how this book would impact your life, and how the posters in her room even scared you and made you more nervous, and that clustered room was filled with mountains of books and heavy breathing. I just love this image. And then as you after this wonderful descriptive area, you start telling us like how you're changing and how your identity begins to develop. And it's lovely because it's completely independent of this teacher. You are this little, I just imagine this little 8-year-old or 9-year-old struggling to figure out how to do things on your own, and here you are doing that, and you tell such wonderful details right down to even what you're wearing. And so now you'll notice in this next paragraph I don't really have anything in green underlined, and so I want to go back with that because I don't know that anything stood out to me as a really strong central idea. And the same thing in this. Okay, so those are all the things that are really good. Now, I say the thing that you have to work on the most is your sentence structure skill and paragraph organization. There are two types of English that we use. There is the conversational English and there is the standard academic English. And you are using a mix of both. And that is very common. In fact, I'm seeing that in most everybody's papers. That's because those of us who speak English and do it fairly well are very accustomed to talking to people, and that we have kind of a different way of talking to people than we do when we write. Like, for example, when we talk, we don't necessarily use transitional phrases and concluding sentences and sum things up. But in writing, we have to be very, very literal. And the reason why is because you have to guide your writer through your message and help them to kind of see what is most important, or else they might walk away with the wrong takeaway. So the difference between academic English and conversational English. So a lot of the red marks on your paper are there because you are using a lot of conversational sentence structure. And like if you and I were sitting at the table talking together, I would have no problem understanding you. It's not that it's unclear or that I can't understand your message, but in writing, the sentences are not necessarily grammatically correct, nor are they necessarily in the right kind of order when you use this type of English in an academic paper. So that's the stuff that I want to help you fix. So for example, right here, I'm going to have you take out this little introduction. Those words just really don't mean anything. And what you're going to say is going to start off like something like this. As a kid, I remember reading books all the time, but never really understanding what I was reading. When I got into Miss Leverton's third grade class, so you're going to take this third grade and move it over here, I started to feel so insecure and stupid about my problem with my reading skills. And I have a little note over here, so you'll see some of the notes. So like if you click, if you markings, things that I can do here. So Miss Leverton always had a mad face, like something was always wrong. And then you didn't have any end mark here, so I'm going to suggest that you put a period. I never understood why, and then you're going to take all of this off because it doesn't really go to anything in your story. So you're talking about what she looks like, what she smells like, and then you talk. So what I would like you to do is actually put this sentence down at the end of the paragraph, because this is the central idea of your whole essay, about how in this class you just did not feel good about yourself as a reader. And there are a lot of reasons probably why. Let's see. Into the next paragraph, this is the central idea, and it's good. It's okay that it's the second sentence because you're setting it up that you remember. So I've asked you to change this instead of a couple of weeks into school, which is kind of like that conversational English, and the way that you would do it is like this in English, in academic English, would be after the first 2 weeks of school, comma, Miss Leverton handed out a book called Frindle, period. She would, take out always, tell us to read a couple of chapters a day, and she would, so we want to make sure we're using the same verbs, give a worksheet to go with it so she could see if we actually read. I remember staring at the cover of this book and thinking in my head, and you know, I just realized something. I think that you probably want to put a comma right here, and then you're going to put little quotation marks. How am I supposed to answer these questions when I can barely understand what I'm even reading about? Because this is like an internal dialogue, okay? Right, so you want to make that into internal dialogue. And then when you go on, you explain yourself very well. See how you did this here? I want you to do that same thing up over here. So I did my work. So I did do my work. Okay, now I did give you a suggestion. Let's change this because this is very conversational, and this is what it would look like if you were to revise that last sentence. So I did my work, period. I made up answers, comma, I went online and copied answers, comma, and there, ... I was done, okay? So now what we're doing is, this is called parallel structure, where you're using the same, like I made up, I went, so it's like I made, I went, I copied. I should have put, that should say I copied. And what that means is that you're using this I and a verb, I and a verb, I and a verb, and I was done. And it's a very nice literary technique. So you want to do something like that with your sentences. It's a much more academic way of saying exactly the same thing of what you've done there. So here you have another main idea. You're really good at the transitions, and this right here, when you're doing dialogue, you want to always put a comma after the tagline, which is she said, and then you'll capitalize the first word of whatever the dialogue is. So she said, and I think I have an example over here. Yeah, place a comma after said and capitalize by. And this is dialogue. So I did what she asked, comma, I read. And then you went on to explain it. Now, you've got this part in here, this whole thing about this room and what, and this is not the concluding idea, but I highlighted this thing about the posters because what I get from this paragraph is that it wasn't only Miss Leverton, but just her whole space made you nervous. And so I wonder if you could take this idea here. Little did I know how much this book and this classroom would impact me in my life and how and maybe it's not live, but how I read and how I know things, okay? And how I know things. What we're doing, Liliya, is trying to combine this idea and this idea. Little did I know how much this book would impact my life and how much this classroom made me nervous and scared because I could not understand what I was reading. Do you kind of see what I'm doing there? And then you can talk about all these details of both the complicated things about reading and what her classroom looks like because you've hinted at that in the topic sentence. Then you continue on. Sitting in that clustered room, you couldn't see anything besides mountains of books just piled up against the windows. I love that. Now, I did make a suggestion about how to combine these two sentences together. Sitting in that clustered classroom, I couldn't see anything but mountains of books piled up against the windows, and the only thing I could hear was Miss Leverton's heavy breathing. What a great image. This woman felt like a monster. And then you came home and everything was so hard for you. So then we transition again, and I would look down at my book and I could see I was not even halfway done. Now, this is that conversational. I'm going to have you take off from that point on. So then you're going to say, I realized and then it's not have, because we're talking about the past. I had to do something. Okay, so I had to do something about my problem. And why couldn't understand what, and why, so here's a little issue right here, and why I couldn't understand what I was reading. Every day since, so every day after Miss Leverton's class, I would come home after school and spend an hour or more practicing reading and writing down little notes to help me understand. I did this for a good, you don't need to say for a good, you did this for I don't want to do that. I did this for 3 weeks, right? And finally I started seeing results. So there's another big idea. I would tell you that you want to put a period after results, and then first it was the worksheets, and then how fast I could fill them out. Okay, so it would be first it was the worksheets. First I could understand the worksheets, and then I could fill them out faster, right? Okay, so now, then we have this kind of piece of story in here where this very negative thing happened to you, which is a terrible part, but it's an important part of your story. So we don't want to say, but before I got here, let me tell you what really went down. Now, what I need to know is, did this happen before you decided to practice, or is this the motivating factor to the practice, or did you start doing this before she embarrassed you? So if this happened before the practice, then you need to bring this paragraph before it. Okay, so I have to stop, but and then you're going to move that ahead up the top. Okay, let's just shoot down to the bottom here. It's more of the same thing, just changing out some of the sentences, fixing the dialogue, changing this from conversational English to academic English, and then the same thing here. All the red sentences are just, they have to do with the wording of the sentence that I want you to fix in the way that I've been telling you. I love how you ended the essay. It's very good. And I think that you have a nice conclusion. Okay, I'm going to have to take a few minutes off of this recording, else and then I will submit your feedback. Thank you, Liliya.